Well, the day began with news of a petrol bomb being thrown through the windows of a French satirical magazine, Charlie Hebdo, in Paris. And this a day after the publication named the Prophet Mohammed as its editor-in-chief. The front cover carried a caricature of the Prophet, making a facetious comment. And the question is, did the magazine go too far? To discuss this, we brought together Nabila Ramdani, a Paris-born journalist of Algerian descent, and Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, a French political commentator. Anne-Elisabeth began by describing the cover to us.
It's got a jolly-looking character who presumably could be the Prophet. He certainly is supposed to be the guest editor. And he says, you will get 100 lashes if you don't die of laughter. And inside were a series of jokes and cartoons and programs, and all of this was tied up to the victory of Ennahda, the Islamist party in Tunisia, where they garnered 30% of the vote, as well as the announcement by one of the council presiding over the change of regime in Libya that they would adopt Sharia law. And the issue, the editor said in a number of interviews today, was designed to react to something that was seen as rather serious. And it's in the very old French anti-religious tradition, which belongs to the sort of French libertarian right, and which was directed against the Catholic Church for centuries almost, before it is now directed against the church that is the most militant right now, which is Islam.
And did you then find it to be an effective satire?
I find it funny. I think the drawings are very funny. I think I didn't find it terribly offensive, and I thought it was amusing, and it was certainly in the tradition of Charlie Hebdo, which I've been reading almost consistently for the past 30 years.
Nabila Ramdani, now there you are, and your background is Algerian. What was your reaction when you saw this issue of Charlie Hebdo?
Well, first of all, it has to be said that it is a special edition dedicated to Sharia law, and the ironic title was Sharia Hebdo as opposed to its regular title, Charlie Hebdo. So there was a definite play on words in the title. And I have to say, it's the eternal debate between religious expression and indeed freedom of speech. But it has to be noted that Charlie Hebdo has form on this one. In 2005, it is this very magazine which republished the deeply offensive Danish cartoons, and it was taken to court by a Muslim organization for insulting Muslims. The organization lost the case in 2007. And I think Charlie Hebdo has been choosing its moment to shock everybody all over again. And it's chosen this moment because Islamic groups seem to be doing rather well following the Arab Spring revolutions in Libya and Tunisia. And so Charlie Hebdo has made some pretty poor jokes in its latest edition. And it's accompanied with some very cliched cartoons. But there is a very serious message behind its humor, which is essentially that Islam is not compatible with democracy, and that's why people found it extremely offensive.
So you found it offensive, did you?
I did, because you have to put it in the context of Islam in France, and this magazine was really designed to cause maximum offense. You're talking about a country where you have 6 million Muslims, the largest Muslim population in Europe. And they won't find it particularly humorous because Muslims in France experience discrimination in every walk of life, including housing, education, employment, and indeed religious expression. So the publishing of an image of the Prophet is blasphemous under Islamic law, and Charlie Hebdo has exceeded themselves in bad taste. And many actually view the content of this magazine as pure racism dressed up as satire.
So Anne-Elisabeth is deliberately offending 6 million people, a fair use of free speech.
Well, first of all, this is not, this is reading intentions whether or not. It's not deliberately offending 6 million people, if only because many Muslims have come to the fore speaking today and saying, well, I might disagree, but freedom of speech is freedom of speech. First of all, I'd like to say that there's a huge difference between attacking individuals or attacking people, attacking Muslims, which is vile, or any other religious group, Jews, Catholics, you name it, and attacking a religion, which is a freedom that was won in the 18th century by Voltaire and which I would not like to relinquish. Charlie Hebdo has made a tradition of being offensive about absolutely everything under the sun. They were created after exactly the same magazine with a slightly different title had been taken off the stands because they had carried a cartoon about the death of General de Gaulle, saying it was a small incident, not many dead. And they have a great tradition, and many other sort of fine examples of the French satirical press have a tradition in offending various religions and various established powers, as, for instance, Private Eye does in England. And all of this is part of freedom of expression. It is not directed against people, it is directed against ideas, and every idea should be possible to discuss and attack any idea in the way you choose. I think it's very important for our civilization.
So, Nabila, are they not entitled to the full protection of the French state? I mean, now that their officers have been firebombed, they should be able to call on the state to find out who did it and bring them to justice.
Well, absolutely, and you actually bringing the essential matter of the law into the discussion. Nobody would condone criminality of any kind, and especially not throwing petrol bombs in, the offices of Charlie Hebdo in a highly populated area where lives could have been put at risk. And I think I will go further as far as the wider scope of this matter is concerned. It very much has to do with the law, and you have to be very rigorous about where you overstep, freedom of speech and use it as a tool to harm people. Now, this is clearly an issue about what you should and should not be allowed to express in a democracy. And we've heard the Minister of the Interior in France, Claude Guéant, who said that all the French should feel sympathy for Charlie Hebdo, which is a magazine that expresses by its very existence the freedom of the press, which is, of course, a sacred freedom in France, and it should be preserved by all means. But it also has to be pointed out that it's the same Interior Minister who also declared that Islam was a problem in France. And I'll take a very practical example of how the law should apply. It has to be pointed out that France outlaws Holocaust denial and indeed anti-Semitic behavior. Now, there was a highly publicized case over the summer when British fashion designer John Galliano was fined after being found guilty of launching an anti-Semitic rant at people in a bar. Now, that rant was heard by a handful of people, of mainly drunk people. And Mr. Galliano found himself arrested and then convicted. So you have to wonder if the same principles of the law should perhaps be extended to this magazine, an extremely powerful media organization which uses, its power to insult and indeed ridicule another religion. And these were not just well-meaning jokes, but an absolute rubbishing of Islam and everything it stands for. And I'm really not convinced that this kind of vicious attacks fits into freedom of expression.
Well, that's the journalist Nabila Ramdani, and before that, you heard the journalist Anne Elizabeth Moutet.